One thing that crosses people's mind when watching Death Note is who was actually smarter between Light and L. This question doesn't just extend to their canon selves, but even their non-canon selves, which are known as their CTW counterparts, or Change the World. For those unfamiliar, it's basically an alternate universe where L was able to figure out the 13-day rule and then successfully thwart Light before he actually had the chance to kill L. These counterparts are on another level, with extra feats from their timeline being a bit different to the manga, making them scale higher. This doesn't mean their canon selves are just suddenly uninteresting either, as no one has still not covered the depth of the original series when it comes to really overviewing their battle of pride, or what Nier calls winning the game. Even though this battle has ended in two different versions, with Light winning in the OG/canon version or manga/anime, and L in the alternative timeline in CTW, fans are still arguing about it today. Whether it be that Light was incredibly lucky and had so many advantages, or L was incredibly overrated and made countless mistakes. Today we're going over this matchup from every angle, giving you the ultimate analysis on why this battle ended the way it did. We'll be primarily covering the manga, but occasionally reference the novels, including CTWL at the end of the video, along with CTW Light, where their versions of themselves scale way differently, different feats and all. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Subscribe, going for 100,000 subscribers, and join my Discord if you have more video suggestions. Follow my Twitter as well to stay updated with the content. Thank you. When it comes to discussing Light vs L, people always refer to specific moments and argue that one had an advantage over the other, yada yada. But truth be told, there's never really a point in the series where one or the other is just completely beating down the other. It's always a constant back and forth between the two, hence cat and mouse. And even if it seems like one or the other has the overwhelming advantage in the moment, the opponent is able to turn the tide on the other instantly. To document this matchup in the best way possible, let's start from the very beginning. L decides to take on the Kira case, but people tend to forget that he wasn't going in blind. While this yes, L had a general lack of knowledge when it came to the notebook and the Shinigami, it's not as if he just decided to solve the case on a whim. He was actively keeping up with it behind the scenes, but didn't make it official to the ICPO that he would take on the case until the second chapter of the series. Right off the bat, he requests to work with the Japanese police, which sparks confusion from Suichiro Matsuda. L simply states that he strongly believes Kira is located in Japan. This also relates to another misconception. L had a pretty good idea of Light's location, but didn't get solid confirmation until he pulled off the Lindell Taylor trap. But how could L know where Light is? Did he just somehow know in order to move the plot along? Not at all. If you're in L's position, deducing that Kira is Japanese isn't incredibly far-fetched. It's actually the most logical conclusion. We as the viewer know that Light's first kill was an assailant named Kuro Otohara. He'd taken 6 lives and held a nursery hostage. Aft claimed the lives of 6 people, and in the hostage situation he's gotten both students and children involved. Light already has his name and face in clear view, and so he doesn't hesitate to write his name down. He waits for over 40 seconds, and the news report changes, informing everyone of his death. After that, countless other criminals began to die of strange heart attacks, just like that specific day in Shinjuku. It doesn't take much to connect the dots and realize that ground zero for these strange heart attack deaths was in Japan. Many fans assume that the Lindell Taylor trap was what L used to fully lower Light's guard, but what if it started way before that? Prior to Light getting confronted by Lindell Taylor, he's gushing over a Kira website that one of his supporters made, and goes on a long tangent to Ryuk about how he's actually making change and having the effect on the world that he desired. But what if this was all a ruse? What if L was the one who created it? Of course it's a theory, but it's not totally far-fetched. Not many people seem to realize, but early Death Note Light was actually pretty cautious and structured, at least before he encountered L. He made sure to not let his Kira activities get in the way of school and always stuck by a strict routine. He has limited time between school and bedtime, and he absolutely must stay at the top of his classes. If he doesn't get enough sleep, he'll lose concentration and begin to slip. However, after he gets positive reinforcement from the website, Light, narcissism, and ego begin to quite literally blind him. It also doesn't help that he's publicly called out for something he was just getting congratulated for, and when it comes to the topic of justice, it's a hill that Light is willing to die on. So what if this website was actually created by L? Perhaps it was done in hopes to inflate his ego, make Kira feel more comfortable and powerful than he already does. This would give L the clean opportunity to pull off an attack that not even Kira could foresee. And what do you know? It works like a charm, because it all leads to the infamous Lindell Taylor trap being set, which involves a man appearing on live television and publicly bashing Kira, as well as flaunting the amount of power and influence he has amongst the police. He calls Light evil, which triggers him so badly that he decides to write his name in the notebook and watch him die. But of course, we know this was a trap. L would soon appear on the screen and reveal that the man Light had just killed out of anger was actually a criminal scheduled to be executed today. This also wasn't a live broadcast and was specifically held in the Kanto region of Japan, which fully confirms L's previous deduction of Kira being located in Japan. Now, another topic we have to address regarding the trap is how Light fell for it. A lot of fans have gripes with this trap as they believe it's really easy to avoid, and truth be told, it is. Just ignore L L and don't kill Lyndell Taylor. Granted, L would have still found out you're in Japan, as he was pretty confident, but confirming it would have taken much longer. But the main question that people tend to have is, how did Light fall for such a simple trap? It all comes down to ego, or more specifically, the Lyndell Taylor trap would obviously be easy to avoid if you're not Light, because it was made specifically for Light. At this point in the series, L had a rough sketch of Light's profile, meaning his characteristic, temperament, and overall psychology. He knew how to push the right buttons to get the results that he wanted, which is exactly what happened in Chapter 2. L had a stand-in call Light out for killing people and said straight up that he's evil. This upsets Light not just because of his ego, but because he genuinely believes that he is the embodiment of justice. So for someone to challenge his good deeds is an absolute insult in his eyes. There's also the fact that Light completely underestimated L. His guard was completely down because L called him out and made it pretty easy to be taken care of. Light is someone who thinks of all possible scenarios, but not in that very moment. His ego had gotten the better of him. In Light's defense, I will say most people wouldn't have been able to deduce the existence of a super genius detective that's hiding in the shadows. Light has gone unchallenged for all of his life pretty much. He may as well believe he's the smartest person in Japan. So for someone else to set a trap for him and completely blindside him was, well, unexpected. Most people would hide away in fear or give up the notebook entirely, but this only motivated Light more, and he set out to defeat L and create the new world atop of his ashes. From here, the police hand in their reports on all possible victims related to Kira, and as L suspected, their names and faces were made public. However, just as it seems like they're closing in on Kira, he completely changes his memo and kills 23 criminals 1 hour apart from each other. This makes the police question as to whether or not Kira is a student, but L clearly acknowledges Kira's attempt at creating discord amongst them. In the eyes of L, Kira is a student, that much is certain. However, he's able to somehow freely control the time of death. L doesn't say it outright, but he knows that this is a direct challenge to him from Kira, as he's blatantly telling L that he has access to police information. Light also reveals that he had already been killing on purpose on a student schedule to make them suspect he's a student, which leads to L finding out. Light, seeing that on the police database, then starts changing his killing patterns, leading to L again realizing that Light is part of the police force in some way. This means that Light actually leads L this whole time. It's not like Light wasn't aware that his own killing patterns were like a student. He didn't just unconsciously do it. It's only said in the manga that he was purposely doing it. Once again, people tend to bash on Light for this decision, and the criticism is understandable. L knows that Kira is in Japan, but it's still a big place. If you play your cards right, switch up the times you kill or even the method that you kill with, you'd be able to throw L off, making it take much longer for him to be found. However, Light wants to be acknowledged by the world. He wants people to know that there's a righteous God out there, casting judgment onto those who commit crimes. He also acted this way to purposely lead L and the police on. It's all a part of his isolation strategy. Rather than fight tooth and nail to figure out who L is, he'll let the police do that for him. Light tells Ryuk that human beings are two-faced creatures, which is true. Nobody trusts L because how could you trust a person that hides his real name and face? Now that L knows that Kira has access to classified information, it won't be long until he starts to investigate the police. In turn, they'll be investigating L. Once they figure out L's identity, Light will simply use the death note and take care of him. However, Light gets distracted by Ray Penba, an FBI agent sent to monitor Light for unusual activity. Ryuk lets him know this, and Light does his best to act natural as he heads back home. Light has to take care of this guy, but getting close to him will be a challenge. This is where Ryuk offers to give Light the Shinigami eyes, but he rejects it, stating that he plans to live and rule the new world for a very long time, and gaining the eyes will hinder that plan. Instead, Light has a better way to deal with Ray Penba. To start, he uses the notebook to kill 3 criminals via heart attacks, but each of them does something strange before death. The first criminal cuts his finger and draws a pentagram in blood. The second writes a letter, and the third one escapes and dies in a public bathroom. In L's eyes, Kira is doing this to test his power, and in order to get confirmation, he needs the media to act as his source. But in actuality, it's all a misdirection from Light. L spends long periods of time mulling over the bloody pentagram and letter that the criminals crafted up, which leaves the FBI and police defenseless. Just as L knows Light, Light knows L, or at the very least has a pretty good idea of how he acts. He knows that due to his detective work and the nature of the case, he's going to scrutinize over the most minor details, which will give him enough time to pull off the bus jacking strategy. However, Light is able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone in this specific instance. He's able to distract L and test out the limits of the notebook. He figures out that the notebook can't manipulate a person into traveling impossible distances like going from Japan to France. It also can't draw the face of someone they've never seen, nor can it write information they don't know about, as Light attempts to manipulate a criminal into writing, in quote, "I know L's suspicious of the Japanese police," end quote. Everything has been prepped, and Light proceeds to enact the bus-jacking plan. This is a successful Light. With tons of creativity and a slight amount of prep time, Light was able to get the ID of his stalker without incriminating himself or lifting a single finger, that being his name, Ray Penba. He was able to see firsthand how efficient the notebook is when used outside of the box. He waits 1 week to kill Ray Penba, but in the meantime, kills another criminal and has it whip up a strange note in order to distract L. This gives Light enough time to deal with Ray Penba, and he does it in the most efficient way possible. He pre-writes his name in the notebook and has him come to the train station. From here, he threatens him from behind and orders him to board a train. He then asks him to go on his laptop and pull up the names and photographs of all the FBI agents in Japan, before telling him to write those names down on a sheet of paper. Ray does as instructed, and once he exits the train, he dies right on time, that Light specified. Something that actually isn't touched upon is that the folder Ray receives from Light is made up of pages from the death note, and in those pages are all the pre-written deaths of the FBI agents. Ray just can't see it because it's been glued over with a piece of paper. After Ray dies, the FBI agents are sent a file with the names and faces of each other, but the times at which they die are random. This was done in order to make sure that no specific agent stood out, making it harder for L to track down which FBI agent Kira made contact with. In just 2 moves, Light has put L on the back foot. The FBI are terrified out of their minds and no longer want to work with him, and what's even worse is that the FBI director informs Suichi that L was investigating them behind closed doors. Nobody trusts L, and he has no support. This is a huge win for Light because he started off at a disadvantage. He didn't know L's name or face, but L knew a great deal about him, as shown from their first encounter. Light was such a significant opponent that he forced L, the greatest detective in the world, to actually reveal his face to a select few individuals whom he trusts. But of course it's also part of L's plan to also narrow down the team of the police to a select few who he trusts, as Suichi reveals. However, Light's ego gets the better of him. He just can't help himself, and in a moment of desperation and utter manipulation, he kills Ray Penba's fiancée, Naomi Misora. Due to her sheer wit and intelligence, she was able to figure out that Kira can kill a number of different ways and is not limited to heart attacks. If this secret got out, Light would be playing defense for a good amount of time. Now, I'm not saying that taking care of Naomi Misora in that moment was the wrong move, but rather he should have planned it more. If Naomi joined the investigation, it definitely would have been harder for Light to navigate his battle against L, but we're still forgetting that he would have had the memory loss plan to enact, which was the ultimate trump card that turned the tides of the battle against L. Killing Naomi Misora just causes Light a lot of grief in the long run, but pretty much the cat and mouse / back and forth for these two geniuses have been constant. Now L really has to pull something that can knock Kira's calmness and get him more scared. After rewatching the footage over and over again, L points out that Ray Penba held onto an envelope as he entered the ticket gate, but upon exiting the train and dying, the envelope is no longer with him. He was also looking at someone in the train, which could be Kira from L's perspective. He's then told by Watari that Ray Penba's fiancée had visited the station, but now disappeared. He connects the dots and hypothesizes that Kira had something to do with this, before narrowing down the search to 2 families. Before Ray Penba died, he was watching the Kitamura household and the Yagami household. He proposes that cameras be installed to watch the family, and Suichi reluctantly agrees. Light gets what he wanted, but it comes at a cost. He's close to L, but far too close to make a move. Luckily, he's able to figure out that someone had been in his room based on how the door handle had been positioned. He has a specific way of leaving the door handle whenever he leaves in order to know if someone had been in his room. For extra insurance, he placed the paper slip down below and places a mechanical pencil on the side of the hinges. That pencil had been snapped, the piece of paper had been returned to its original position, and even the handle was placed exactly as it was. Light manipulates Ryuk into finding out the location and number of all the cameras that L placed into his room, while as he focuses on distracting his father and L by just acting normal. This turns L's sus meter up, and a lot of people seem to have a problem with this. Fans believe that L was unfairly obsessed with Light just because he was too normal. On the off chance that he wasn't Kira, Death Note would be a series about a genius high schooler being stalked, harassed, and traumatized by a shut-in detective who's convinced he's a supernatural murderer. Sounds like a fanfiction. However, L did have reasons to suspect Light. The way he acts is just off-putting because he's so perfect. He's careful not to make mistakes and does things far too blatantly, like reading an adult magazine specifically in front of a camera, getting all comfy and cozy. As L says himself, it's like he's trying to force people into believing that he has nothing to hide, but that just makes him more suspicious. Very narcissistic. However, L decides to give Light the benefit of the doubt and play a broadcast which states, Interpol to send a total of 1,500 detectives from various countries to Japan to help solve the Kira case. L proposed this strategy because he believed it would make make Kira suspicious, maybe even nervous, and cause him to slip up or just do something that would lead to the task force catching him. However, Light literally just can't help himself and publicly mocks L as he calls out the fact that this broadcast is idiotic and Kira would see something like this, specifically saying, "This is just a ruse to pressure Kira, but it's pretty obvious, so I bet that Kira's figured it out by now." L smiles and laughs, and in the anime, he peers forward, very interested. This signals L, now for the first time in the series thus far, that he has figured out, or in fact knows, Light is Kira. He knows because this is exactly what Kira would do. And rather, Light himself knows that he's actually talking to L. It's a subtle hint in the entire series that not a lot of people catch. Light already knows that L can know he's Kira all he wants, unconsciously or consciously, but what matters is can he prove it. For Light to stop L, he has to get close to him any means necessary. Light has to take the aggressive approach. After being cooked in episode 2 of the series, or chapter 3, this is the only option for Light who's got nailed down, and then ever since then has been doing a masterclass of cat and mouse. The only option for Light since was to attack. Foreshadow. If Light didn't feel the need to gloat, he could have lowered L's suspicion, but that doesn't matter. The reason why Light vs L is such an interesting matchup is that Light's ego is what gets him into such precarious and compromising situations. If Light didn't have an ego and completely detached himself from battling L and just being Kira, this series would have gone much differently. Everyone can claim that they could just sit in their room and write on the notebook and do the job efficiently, but that's not what Light wants. He wants a challenge, just like how L wants a challenge. But also, in my opinion, this is the only logical way / point if your goal is to get rid of L. How else are you going to do it without getting close? Albeit it's a very risky game, but of course it would be a boring series if Light weren't so flawed in that sense. One thing to note is that he can turn his flaw, at least for now, into big W's. Ryuk then reveals that 64 cameras have been placed into Light's bedroom, which leads to the infamous potato chip strategy. He places a small TV inside the bag and has a strip of the notebook taped to the bottom. While he's studying for his entrance exams, he can write names in the notebook and eventually dispose of the evidence. In Light's eyes, this should absolutely clear him in the perspective of the police because criminals still died even though Light was monitored for 24 hours at a time. The task force think that Light has been cleared, but L still can't shake the feeling of doubt that he feels when he looks at Light. He finds it even stranger that Kira can kill and supposedly act natural, assuming that this is Light Yagami who is Kira. Even when a person thinks about killing, their face changes. Their pupils tense up, and it's obvious that something is wrong. This just supports my previous explanation on why L sussing Light out in the very beginning was not unwarranted. His psychology was genuinely perplexing to L, and didn't make sense. Light didn't realize it, but the more modest he acted in front of L, the more suspicious he looked. L decides to take matters into his own hands and personally confronts Light. And I just want to say, this is what made L such a challenging opponent for Light. Nero and Mello were the halves of L, but the original will always be superior. L was the perfect detective. He knew when to sit back, analyze the facts, and come up with the deductions. But he also knew when to attack and hard counter his opponents, or just pressure them into making moves that would cause them to slip up. L never did anything the same. He was always switching up his angle and keeping Light on his toes. That's why Light was so shocked when L attended his university and straight up told him that he was the person that Light has been trying his hardest to kill for weeks. Who would expect a move like that? Something so forward and open. It's also insanely impressive that Light was able to lock in and not visually react to L's words, but rather acknowledge him and show respect. In the anime, he looks kind of normal, but in the manga, he is actually sweating and tensing a bit, like his leg is moving or twitching or whatever. Once Light sees L off and gets back home, he's absolutely furious, and his anger shocks Ryuk, as he's usually so calm and composed. Obviously, the ego is taking the driver's seat, as Light says he's never been so humiliated in his life. Even if Light wanted to kill L, in that moment, he couldn't. The alias that L used was Hideki Ryuga, which is the same name as the famous pop star. If Light kills him, he may accidentally kill the singer, which would basically be admitting to L that he is Kira. Light is a lion and L is a gazelle. The former has all the tools it needs to take care of its prey, but just can't due to certain restrictions. Light admits he's been outplayed, but he doesn't let that loss define him. He's upset, but he realizes that this is an amazing situation. All this time, he wanted to get close to L so he can kill him, and the latter has broken the ice for him. All he needs to do is keep the mask on tight, and eventually an opportunity will present itself to finish off L. A great trait about Light is his ability to pivot and adapt even if things go wrong. He's never sulking in defeat, he's always on the move and ready to try out the next plan. And by the time you're prepared, he's already 10 steps ahead and has a counter for your counter. This eventually leads to Light and L hanging out, briefly duking it out in a tennis match, which is more so a battle of ideology. But the real kicker is when L once again blindsides Light by straight up saying he suspects that he's Kira. In order order to lower Light's guard, he throws out a small percentage, which if you didn't know is a lie. Whenever L says he suspects someone or makes a deduction, he's usually very certain. A 5% to L would actually represent 95%, meaning that as early as chapters 20 to 22, L was certain that Light was Kira. However, this shouldn't really be a surprising thing to fans who are familiar with Death Note, as I also revealed before, as L is incredibly intelligent. Plus, the problem was never figuring out if Light was Kira or not. L always knew, and this is a fact that should be accepted. The real problem was getting evidence that L could use to throw Light in prison, which is practically impossible since L is dealing with the supernatural. That's why Light feels so confident to just gloat and hit L with random subtle hints. They then head to a cafe and L tests out Light's deductive reasoning ability, but in actuality this is a test to see if the chances of Light being Kira go up or go down. Since I'll be covering this test more in depth in my upcoming Death Note analysis video, I'll only briefly touch upon it, but still get my point across. In chapter 21 of Death Note, L shows Light 3 images, which Kira had given L in this order. L, do you not, gods of death, R, do not eat other than apples, only eat apples. Putting them together in the same order Kira gave, it becomes L, do you know, gods of death only eat apples. Why is this significant? Because Kira would be able to recognize the ordering of these photos, because he sent them to L in the order that they are being presented in. However, this is actually a layered trap. He would be distracted by the fact that L is trying to use his own message against him to realize the numbers attached on the back are specifically for ordering the message differently, whereas the second and third pictures are swapped within the sentence. However, someone smart that isn't Kira would notice the possible sentence that can be created, and if they get preoccupied with the sentence they discovered, they wouldn't be able to notice the purpose of the numbers either. So essentially, L was observing Light closely to see what sort of expression he'd make. But this trap is absolutely not as simplistic as one may think. It's simple on the surface, but a bit more complex once we get into it. Light passes the first test, but fails the second. He fails to process the information quickly and messes up on a basic grammatical cue. But Light digs himself deeper into the hole and gets defensive by saying, I would have been right if there were only 3. This leads to him failing the third layer of the trap, but Light is able to clutch up and lower his ego just a bit by admitting he didn't think that there could be a 4th image. Obviously there wasn't, but he says this to appease L, but the damage has already been done. It increased the probability of Light being Kira in his mind, specifically by 3% and eventually even 7%, which count as 93 and 97% respectively. This is because Light barely passed traps that a person who's Kira wouldn't overthink. Eventually we have Strucho having a heart attack from stress-related reasons rather than Kira. Here L and Light have clashes again, with this whole little scene or part of the manga being one of the biggest foreshadows in the entire series, foreshadowing Light's eventual incarceration and even Light subtly revealing things that he probably shouldn't know as a normal dude. Things like knowing Ray Penba was actually investigating him, unless that was told off scene, but the manga doesn't really present an off-scene moment, but maybe it was, but it's pretty much weird, and L kind of picks up on that in the anime at least. There's a whole little video on that on YouTube, many people have seen it, I've mentioned it before, you can go see it right here. L even tests Light here by mentioning that Yagami could actually be Kira due to the description that Light gave, which makes Light go crazy, which is one of my favorite moments in the series for Light actually caring for his own family, which a lot of people claim he doesn't. For more info on Light's character and general morality, all that stuff, go check out anime versus manga versus movie as I go over the different versions of Light and how the manga obviously is the most accurate as is the original, but actually how a lot of people are actually misinformed about Light due to the anime's interpretation of him. Anyways, moving on. However, Light proving his innocence to L is the least of his worries now. A new Kira has popped up, and she's even more powerful than Light as she possesses not just the notebook, but the Shinigami eyes. This initially excites Light as it means he can get a pawn to use in the battle against L, but things go badly once L lets Light join in on the task force. He has Light craft up a message to send to the second Kira, and she responds by revealing a bunch of sensitive information, such as notebooks, eyes, and Shinigami. Light sees the second Kira as a liability and needs to act quickly, which leads to him going over the second Kira's journal log. He notices a hidden cue inside and decides to head to Ayama to look for them. But surprisingly, this leads to Misa outsmarting both Light and L. She positions herself in a cafe that sees all who pass by, and she happens to see Light and knows that he's Kira because she can't see his lifespan. She then searches up his info on the net, finds his address, and makes her way directly to him. She did save Light the trouble of finding her, but now he actually has to deal with Misa. They interact for a bit, and Light realizes that he can manipulate manipulate her because she's head over heels for him. He crafts up a message and instructs Misa to send it over to Sakura TV, with it basically saying, "I've talked to the real Kira and I've agreed to back off." However, L does not buy this and is able to deduce that the real Kira and second Kira have not only made contact, but are teaming up together. Is this yet again a case of the plot moving in L's favor? Not at all. His arguments for why he believes this are actually pretty valid. Initially, the second Kira was desperate to meet the real Kira, even going as far as to kill people. Now that they've finally gotten what they wanted, they just decide to back off. It's far too sudden and coincidental. L doesn't know the full extent of it, but he confidently believes that the two have teamed up somehow. And L would be right. L is now on guard and informs the task force that if anything happens to him within the next few days, Surichio's son, Light Yagami, is Kira. He then decides to make an aggressive move and approach Light, outright telling him that he isn't the only one who calls himself L, and apparently the title belongs to a whole group of investigators. Light has no idea if this is a lie or a truth, and begins to grow hesitant in whether or not he should take care of L. He gets interrupted by Misa, however, who had decided to come to Light's campus as her photo shoot was nearby, and Light begins to panic. L already suspects that Kira and the second Kira have teamed up and knows the usual company that Light surrounds himself with, so a new girl is going to set off L's alarms. But despite this, he seems to be incredibly calm. He admits that he's actually aware of Misa, and he then reveals that he's been a fan of hers since the March issue of 18. Once again, this throws Light off guard as he wonders how L knows about Misa, and this honestly should have been a dead giveaway that L was onto him. But Light was too focused on the fact that he can now get L's real name. A crowd begins to form as Misa is quite popular, and amongst the commotion, someone seems to touch Misa inappropriately, to which L declares that he'll catch the culprit. Misa's manager comes by and says she has to go, and she bids Light farewell. As L did all his clown, stick, or jester or whatever movements he's doing, he's just jester maxing, Light does not suspect him at all. I don't know why. Light just can't see through this goofy persona of L's. It's like he actually thinks it's real or something. It's kind of weird. I've said this many times. Even Light believes that L actually thinks that he wanted him to be his friend, when the data books say otherwise, that L hates the dude. It's very strange, to be honest. It's like Light only thinks he's the one that deceives people. While L is no means on Light's level of acting and charisma, I do have to say L's acting is pretty good. It literally fooled the audience. But yeah, anyways, as the crowd disperses, Light tells L that he'll see him in psych class, psychology, to which L agrees. Light then realizes he's won, because Misa definitely saw his real name. All Light has to do is call and ask, and then he can kill L whenever he wants. As he calls Misa up, the sound of her phone can be heard, because L took it. This angers Light, but he calms himself down, because he can just call Misa on his other cell phone, which is when L gets a call from Watari, and informs Light that he's arrested Misa on suspicion of being the second Kira. L explains that her room was examined, and clothing fibers similar to those found in the adhesives of the envelopes containing the second Kira tapes were found in her room, alongside other evidence. At this point, Light is just basically finished. He has no control over Misa's actions while she's arrested, and she could spill everything about Kira in the notebook. Even worse, Rem is pressuring Light to figure out a way to free Misa, because if he doesn't, she'll kill him. In just a few moves, L has put Light in the worst possible position ever, and he now has to find a way to somehow clear Misa's name, while as clearing his own. This would practically seem to be impossible, as Misa was found dead to rights with DNA on the Kira tapes. But when there's a will, there's a way. Light eerily bids goodbye to Ryuk for now, because now he has to perform the memory loss plan. Light preps this for over a week, and heads out to a forest to break it down to Rem and Ryuk. It starts with him giving up ownership of the notebook before passing it around in a circle. It ends up in Rem's hands, and he instructs her to fly as far as she can and find a specific kind of person, someone who is greedy and lust for power. Rem must give Light's notebook to that person, but only if they are willing to adhere to the conditions of continuing to kill criminals whose names are broadcasted on television. Rem agrees and flies off, and from here Light tells Ryuk the rest of his plan. He's going to turn himself in because he thinks he's Kira. This will lead to him being put in confinement and under surveillance for 24 hours. Ryuk will be close by, and once Light says get rid of it, this will count as Light relinquishing ownership of the notebook. This will cause Light to lose his memories, but the real kicker is the fact that criminals will continue to die even after Light has been confined. This will be enough to prove his and Misa's innocence for the time being, and from here the plan gets crazy. Light is able to predict his own nature and knows that he'll try to find Kira alongside L. He predicts people's behavior future months in advance, whilst also positioning himself to reunite with the notebook by creating a placeholder Kira. The memory loss plan was so cracked, it actually made L depressed and legitimately perplexed due to how odd the whole situation was. 1 minute, Light is saying he might be Kira, and then out of nowhere, he repents this statement and begs to be let out. He contradicts himself. L actually believed memory loss Light because he was so genuine, and obviously he would be genuine because his memories are gone. And L can read anyone. Best psychoanalysis on Earth at that point probably, and he can know when people are lying. Anyways, after letting Misa and Light free, Light is now chained to L in order for L to monitor his behavior throughout the day. While L is depressed or something, Light is able to analyze the stock exchange and figure out that the Yotsuba group are manipulating the market somehow, which Light believes has to do with the Death Note, as countless CEOs of major corporations are dying. It takes a whole arc, but eventually the fake Kira is apprehended and the notebook is recovered. Memory loss Light takes his chance to touch the notebook, and upon doing so, he regains all of his memories. He explains his plan and further reveals that he has a solution to kill the fake Kira, even if he's nearby L. By pulling out the pin of his watch 4 times in less than a second, a panel slides out, revealing a scrap of the notebook. Light pokes himself, draws blood, and is able to write Higuchi's name. He dies and ownership returns to Light. His memories remain intact. The task force reveals the notebook and finds fake rules located on the book. Specifically, 1. If the person using this death note fails to consecutively write names of people to be killed within 13 days of each other, then the user will die. 2. If this death note is made unusable by tearing it up or burning it, all the humans who have touched the death note till then will die. Both of these rules were obviously strategically created by Light. They clear Light and Misa of all suspicion, because not only were criminals still dying whilst they were incarcerated, but if Light or Misa were actually Kira, they would have died within 13 days. Not many know this, but the second rule was made as sort of a precaution to prevent L from burning the notebook, therefore keeping it intact. The memory loss plan is honestly Light's greatest plan in the series. He went from being on the losing end to taking care of all variables and positioning himself as totally innocent. Even better, he was essentially able to manipulate Rem into killing L, as Rem realized that L did not believe the fake rules and wanted to test them out. Meaning logically, from all the way to Misa getting into incarceration and Light willingly letting himself go into confinement, he had already planned to kill L from there. Insane. Because by forcing Misa to kill as Kira again, it traps Misa and isolates Rem into a few decisions. Kill L, or let Misa get arrested. That he could use Jealous's same demise later on when seeing that Rem loves Misa. So essentially from episode 15, named Wager, it really was the all-deciding wager. It was the final act of the series, and everything after that would be game over. If L had succeeded in testing these rules out, Misa would have been incarcerated once more, and it wouldn't have taken long for Light to be under suspicion again, meaning it's all over. However, even though the memory loss plan eventually leads to L's death, he died swinging. He was far more calm and composed than his anime counterpart, and was still making deductions during the days leading up to his death. He was able to piece the information together, and realizes that pieces of the notebook can still be torn and used, which explains how Light was able to kill under surveillance, as well as possibly kill Higuchi, as it's shown in the manga panel. Before L could test out the 13-day rule though, Rem wrote his name in the notebook, ending the battle between Light and L. However, what if L actually won? What if L was given a chance to test out these fake rules? Would Light still succeed? Does such a notion even exist? And to change the world L, an alternate version of L that was able to beat Light, but do so in such a way that the battle didn't even seem close. Just like his manga counterpart, CTW-L had already sussed out the 13-day rule, CTW meaning change the world. He has Watari track Misa, which leads to him finding another notebook, which perfectly matches as the murder weapon that the second Kira used. Based on his profile of Kira, along with all the murders that have taken place, he's able to deduce definitively that Light Yagami is Kira Prime. He also figures out that the 13-day rule was all part of a ruse meant to manipulate Rem into killing him. L is able to completely debunk Light's memory loss plan and the 13-day rule. He doesn't tell the task force and takes a more calculated route, which involves teaming up with Watari to begin making a fake death note that would act as a replica of Misa's notebook, predicting a scenario where Misa would tell Light that her notebook was gone, which would provoke Light into getting Misa to kill L with leftover pages of his notebook with her Shinigami eyes. Light would take the bait, which would inevitably lead to him being exposed amongst the task force. Ryuk would still go on to kill Light, crowning L as the victor, albeit at the cost of his own life, as he had to trick Light into believing that he had died, and he does this by writing his own name in the notebook, scheduling his death to be within 23 days. He's also just able to stop his own heartbeat to further sell the act, which is absolutely insane. During his last 23 days on Earth, CTWL has many unfinished cases that he needs to solve, but he's mainly focused on the K case, involving a bioterrorist by the name of K, who plans to unleash a disease on the world that is far more deadly and potent than even even Ebola. So what does L do? He just speedruns the case. And mind you, these aren't your run-of-the-mill criminal cases. These are cases that not even the largest investigative agencies in the world can hope to solve. They need someone of L's caliber to tackle it, and he's able to do it on the fly, even going as far as to solve 3 cases at a time. He solves these cases with incredible accuracy, despite the fact that the info he has to work with is incomprehensible, while also solving these cases while speaking multiple languages to overseas authorities, specifically French, Japanese, Italian, and English. This shows the range at which L can multitask. Deductive reasoning, verbal comprehension index, and processing speed are all at play. This multitasking and literal god-tier observational ability doesn't even just stop at the random cases he's solved. While he's focusing on K, L opens up an email while simultaneously operating several computers and gets flooded with documents relating to Professor Nikaido's past achievements. These include recent activities, conference papers, and lab work. L processes all of this information within an instant and uses it to conclude that there is an 83% chance at which the information he received could pose as a threat to the entire world. Keep in mind that L took in hundreds of thousands of words within a second and used the info to create a numerical model as to how cooked the world would be. I can promise a future video going into more depth regarding CTWL, but just know that the feat he performs in the live action movies and novels are insane, and he would quite literally and honestly mid-diff Light. The Light that CTWL faces is also a CTW version of Light, whose best feats are pretty similar to the normal Light, with just arguably being less emotional and easily detached rather than going through a character arc like he did in the original of becoming Kira over the series and losing his sense of self. You can watch anime vs manga vs live action for an analysis of these different versions of Light, as I've already said before. It's honestly very highlighting towards how Light is written, and of course the manga is the most accurate. CTW Light has an insane feat though, of orchestrating his own girlfriend's death and having Nami Misora kill her on some devious Black Air Force energy, but even still, CTW Light isn't anything like CTWL, so it still remains mid-diff. As for the manga, which this video mainly went over, Manga L actually loses to Manga Light at a high to extreme difficulty. My reason for that, well, you'll see in a bit, but let me keep going. BB Case Novel plus File 13 and other statements is what we can just call Canon L and Canon Light, and they would actually be less close than Manga only, where actually Canon L would be over Light, but only with a high diff. This is due to numerous statements boosting and glazing L a lot, like being one mind that can basically rival multiple investigative bureaus and 7 intelligence agencies, along with his IQ increasing over time as some weird superhuman trait that he just has. By the time he faced off against Kira, it had leapt several notches, end quote. Kid L is also a contentious suggestion to even be canon, as some people argue that the Whammy House one-shot is part of the CTW timeline due to its release being alongside the CTW novel and movie, I'm pretty sure. However, if you want to take it as canon, it only serves to hype L more. As a kid, he was able to launch Watari's net worth to over 20,000 times the original amount, with Watari already standing at multis to tens of millions before that. While gaining money isn't some feat or a specific intelligence thing, it really just serves that L is ahead of his time. He can just intuitively perform, just becoming rich out of nothing, but reading the charts. Lol. As for manga, however, although L is smarter than Light, the former was at a complete disadvantage. Found out info regarding the notebook at a time that was just genuinely disadvantageous, and he was constantly struggling to find solid proof to convict Light. This isn't L's fault for any means, as not only was he dealing with the supernatural, but Light was admittedly very lucky on numerous occasions. This does not discredit Light either, as he definitively outsmarted L numerous times in the series, most notably with the memory loss plan. My original thoughts back in 2021 to 2022 was that L was actually overall at a high to extreme diff in the original manga, over Light, as L is cracked like that. But rereading the manga over and over again, many times, it shows that Light honestly leads L on a lot. While L does too, some of the decisive points of deduction, like the student routine and Kira knowing police info, all worked in Light's favor to getting close to L. He's the one that feeds it to L. L doesn't figure it out without Light. He's literally leading L on. And of course, the memory loss plan is not just encapsulating going over it against a mountain of evidence that is undeniable to naive people like the task force, where it was so obvious. Aizawa says when no criminals were dying, that Light and Misa are undeniably Kira. It doesn't matter anymore. It also served to get rid of L and Watari, the most major obstacles of Light's career as Kira. Yeah, the memory loss plan cleared that much. Another thing to give to L, which you can take as a theory or not, but it does really seem like it and is in character for L, is that L's successors were not chosen on purpose, and L had left the Kira case to them. And through this almost testing ground, a game to these geniuses, them working together would stop Kira and they'd be able to settle their differences, as L would obviously be aware of their clashing personalities. And L definitely can foresee if they work together, they would probably surpass him. For someone so smart and a huge multitasker, as he solved over 3,500 cases in his career and worked as different detective codes, how could L not choose a successor? It's not something exactly hard given years pre-Kira case. Thus, L must have purposely not chosen them to allow them to be chosen by fate, or rather their combined abilities would stomp anything. But hey, that's just a theory. Overall, this matchup is very situational and depends on the versions of these characters that we use, but one thing is for certain, both of these characters are far smarter than they're given credit for, and this matchup could have gone so differently with the slightest amount of change. But yeah, there's my answer to Light vs. L, the definitive answer, the ultimate video on every version of them. Thank you.